Section 1. Life in Tohoku before the tsunami. The northeastern coast of Japan, known as Tohoku, was home to fishing villages and small towns that hugged the edge of the Pacific Ocean, places where families had lived for generations. The towns were nestled between lush mountains and the deep blue of the sea, with houses lined up along narrow streets and small boats bobbing gently in harbors. This place was timeless. Here, it seemed as though the world turned a little slower, the hands of the clock gently ticking to the rhythm of the tides. In one such village, Yamada, there lived an elderly fisherman named Koji. He had spent all of his 70 years on this land, his life marked by a routine as steady and predictable as the sun rising over the ocean each day. Every morning, Koji would wake before dawn, taking his fishing boat out to sea. The quiet solitude of the water was where he felt most at home. The sea was a part of him, its salt water in his veins, its power a hum in his bones. His weathered hands knew the feel of every line, every knot, each movement carefully attuned to a lifetime of fishing. Koji was known in the village for his stories, tales of storms he had weathered and legends passed down from his father and grandfather. He spoke of the sea spirits, the umabozu, creatures said to rise from the waves during storms, watching over the fishermen or, at times, bringing them misfortune. The young children would gather around him at night, wide-eyed and spellbound as he told them about his encounters with strange shapes in the fog and whispers in the wind. Most of these were just stories, but Koji believed in the spirits, in the connection between the living and the unseen. To him, the sea held mysteries that humans could not fully understand. Nearby lived Ayumi, a single mother raising her young daughter, Hana. Ayumi was a florist, her life centered around the delicate beauty of flowers, which she arranged carefully each day in her small shop by the harbor. She had lost her husband several years prior to a fishing accident, and the memory of that day still lingered, a shadow that sometimes crossed her face as she worked. But Ayumi kept going, finding solace in her flowers and joy in Hana, who would often play by the shop, laughing and singing as she helped her mother arrange bouquets. Hana's laughter was the soundtrack of Ayumi's life, a sweet reminder of the love she still held on to. Ayumi was well loved in the village. Her gentle nature and resilience inspired the other women, who would often stop by her shop, picking up flowers while sharing news of their own lives. Sometimes they spoke of loss, sometimes of dreams, but always with an undercurrent of resilience that defined their community. Ayumi would prepare flower arrangements for funerals, for anniversaries, for newborns, moments that marked the lives of everyone in Yamada. In a house closer to the mountains lived Hiroshi, a high school teacher who was known for his passion for history and his endless patience with his students. He had grown up in Yamada, and his love for the village ran deep. He would often take his students on field trips to the ocean, teaching them about the tides, the traditional fishing methods, and the folklore of their ancestors. To Hiroshi, preserving the heritage of Tohoku was a duty, a way of honoring the people who had come before them. He was a quiet man but fiercely dedicated to his students, seeing in them the future of the village, a continuation of the life he cherished. Hiroshi often stayed late at the small school, grading papers by lamplight as he watched the stars emerge over the mountains. His students adored him, and parents trusted him completely, knowing he cared for their children as if they were his own. For Hiroshi, Yamada was more than just a place, it was a legacy, a living connection to the past that he hoped would endure long after he was gone. These lives intertwined in the rhythms of village life, marked by seasonal festivals, evening markets, and the smell of fish drying in the sun. The people of Yamada had an unspoken bond, their lives woven together by tradition, history, and a shared respect for the land and sea that sustained them. They shared stories, memories, and dreams, their lives as much a part of the landscape as the mountains and the sea. Each spring, the villagers celebrated the Oban Festival, a time when the spirits of the ancestors were said to return to the world of the living. Lanterns would be lit, filling the night with a warm glow as families honored their loved ones who had passed on. Children would light small paper boats, setting them afloat on the waves, their delicate lights dancing across the water as offerings to the spirits. It was a time of reflection, of honoring those who had gone before, and of feeling the invisible presence of the past guiding them. But amidst the laughter, the rituals, and the stories, a quiet unease lingered. Older villagers spoke in hushed tones of a great wave that had struck the coast generations ago, a story passed down through time as a warning. Some called it the Dragon of the Sea, a creature of myth that could rise without warning, swallowing the land in its hunger. To the younger generation, it was just a story, something to listen to and forget. But the elders would sometimes pause as they looked out over the ocean, their eyes distant, as though they could see the shadow of that ancient wave still lingering just beyond the horizon. Life in Yamata continued as it had for generations, each day marked by the rising and setting of the sun, the ebb and flow of the tides. But beneath this steady rhythm was a fragility that no one could truly comprehend, a vulnerability that only the oldest among them understood. For the sea, while bountiful and beautiful, was also powerful and unpredictable, a force that could take as easily as it could give. Then, one morning, the earth trembled. Section 2, The Earthquake and the Tsunami. March 11, 2011, began like any other day. The villagers of Yamata went about their routines, tending to the morning's tasks. Koji had risen before dawn, guiding his small fishing boat across the still, gray water. Ayumi arranged flowers in her shop, watching as Hana played by the door, her laughter brightening the quiet morning. Hiroshi prepared for his history class, his mind already drifting to the weekend, when he planned to take his students to the shore to study the tides. At 2:46 p.m., just as life seemed to be moving along its gentle, predictable path, the earth began to shake. It started with a tremor, a shiver that rattled windows and sent small objects tumbling off shelves. At first, the villagers paused, their eyes widening as they felt the ground moving beneath them. But within seconds, the tremor grew into a violent quake, a force so powerful it seemed as if the earth itself had turned against them. Buildings swayed, walls cracked, and the air was filled with the sounds of shattering glass, crumbling concrete, and the terrified cries of those caught off guard. Koji, out at sea, felt his boat lurch violently. He gripped the railing, his heart pounding as he watched the shoreline shudder. From his vantage point, he could see the entire coast swaying as the ground rippled like water. He had seen earthquakes before, but this was something else, something far more terrifying. The sea beneath him churned as if it, too, was caught in the quake's fury, tossing his boat like a toy on a storm-tossed pond. In the village, Ayumi clutched Hana tightly, her arms wrapped around her daughter as they crouched beneath the shop's doorway. She could feel the floor moving beneath her, a dizzying sensation that made her stomach lurch. Around her, glass vases toppled, shattering on the floor, flowers scattering like fallen dreams. She whispered reassurances to Hana, though her own heart raced with fear. In her mind, she repeated the words her mother had told her during childhood: stay calm, protect what you love. But the words felt fragile, barely enough to hold back the tidal wave of panic rising within her. Hiroshi was at school, guiding his students under their desks, his voice steady even as his hands shook. He kept his gaze fixed on the classroom windows, watching as the mountains in the distance seemed to tremble. The children clung to him, their small faces pale with fear, looking to him for reassurance. He tried to remain calm, but a gnawing dread filled his heart, a sense that this was no ordinary quake. The shaking went on for minutes that felt like hours. As the ground finally began to settle, the villagers emerged from their shelters, eyes wide and breaths shallow. They gathered in clusters, checking on one another, their voices filled with relief and confusion. People hugged, hands clasped tightly as they murmured prayers of thanks. But as the ground stilled, a new sound filled the air, a distant roar, a sound that grew louder with each passing second, rising like the approach of a monster. Koji, still out at sea, felt a chill run down his spine as he looked out across the horizon. He could see it, rising like a dark shadow, a wave, massive and relentless, stretching as far as his eyes could see. It was as if the ocean itself had risen, drawn upward by an unseen force, towering over the coastline. The stories of the Dragon of the Sea flashed through his mind, tales of waves that could swallow whole villages, leaving nothing but silence in their wake. Koji knew he had seconds to act. He turned his boat, steering toward deeper water, where he hoped the wave would pass without crashing down upon him. As he fled, he could only look back, his heart breaking as he watched the wave grow, its shadow consuming the sun as it loomed closer to the shore. In the village, the warning sirens blared. People screamed, scrambling to higher ground, their faces pale with terror. Ayumi clutched Hannah's hand, pulling her daughter out of the shop and into the street. Around her, neighbors were running, shouting for loved ones, their voices barely audible over the wail of the sirens and the growing roar of the wave. Ayumi ran, her heart pounding, her thoughts a frantic jumble as she glanced back to see the dark wall of water surging toward them. "Run, Hannah, run," she urged, pulling her daughter along as they joined the flood of villagers scrambling up the hill. They pushed through the crowds, desperation lending them speed as they climbed, Hannah's small hand slipping in her grip as they navigated the steep path. Ayumi could hear the wave now, a deep, rumbling roar that filled the air like thunder, so loud it seemed to drown out her very thoughts. Hiroshi, who had guided his students up to the school's roof, stood frozen as he saw the wave approaching. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, a wall of water as tall as a building, moving with relentless speed, sweeping away everything in its path. He watched as houses, cars, and trees were swallowed by the wave, disappearing beneath the dark water as though they had never existed. His students clung to him, their small bodies trembling as they looked on in silent horror. The wave hit the village with a force that defied comprehension. It swept through streets, tearing buildings from their foundations, uprooting trees, and scattering debris in all directions. The water surged, black and churning, carrying with it the remnants of lives, of dreams, of everything that had once been. Ayumi held Hannah tightly, feeling the ground shake beneath them as the wave crashed below, its roar mingling with the cries of those still fleeing. Koji, out at sea, could only watch as the wave consumed the shore, the village disappearing beneath the water. His heart ached as he imagined his neighbors, his friends, his entire world being swept away. He thought of the children he had told stories to, the friends he had fished alongside, the family he would never see again. He gripped the railing of his boat, tears streaming down his weathered face as he bore witness to the destruction of everything he had ever known. For hours, the water surged, receding only to rush back with renewed force, dragging everything with it. When it finally began to settle, the landscape was unrecognizable. What had once been a vibrant village was now a wasteland of debris, the ocean reclaiming all it had taken. The survivors, those who had managed to reach high ground, looked out in silence, their faces pale and expressionless, as if their souls had been taken along with their homes. In the aftermath, the silence was deafening. The air was heavy with the scent of salt water and mud, a dampness that seemed to seep into every breath. Ayumi held Hannah close, feeling the child's small frame shudder as they gazed out at the ruins of their village. Hiroshi gathered his students, his arms wrapped protectively around them as he tried to soothe their tears, though he had no words of comfort to offer. Koji's boat drifted back toward the shore, his heart hollow as he surveyed the devastation. He could see figures wandering the shoreline, survivors searching through the wreckage, calling out for loved ones, their voices swallowed by the empty vastness of the sea. But as night fell, the survivors began to sense something else, something lingering in the ruins, a presence that filled the air with an unnatural chill. People reported hearing voices, faint whispers that seemed to rise from the water, calling out in tones of sorrow and confusion. Some saw shadows moving along the shore, figures that vanished when approached, leaving only footprints in the damp sand. For Koji, Ayumi, Hiroshi, and the other survivors, the haunting had only begun. As they searched through the ruins for remnants of their old lives, they were accompanied by the silent, sorrowful spirits of those who had been lost. The ocean, it seemed, had returned more than just water, it had returned the souls of the dead, bound to the place of their final moments, lingering in the mist as they searched for peace. Section 3. Encounters with the Spirits. In the days that followed the tsunami, the survivors of Yamada wandered through the ruins of their town in a daze, their minds numb with grief and disbelief. Everything they had known was gone, erased in a single, merciless surge of water. The once familiar streets were now fields of debris, littered with fragments of homes, clothes, photographs, and other remnants of lives that had been swept away. But as they searched the ruins for anything that could be salvaged, something else lingered, an unshakable presence that filled the air, as if the souls of those lost in the wave were still there, watching over them. The first to notice was Koji. He had come down to the shore to search for his house, or what remained of it. The old fisherman moved slowly, his heart heavy with the knowledge that most of his neighbors, friends he had known for decades, were gone.